Tonight, drift into the haunting story of Adea Shabani, a young dreamer drawn to the bright lights of Hollywood, whose gentle spirit touched everyone she met. But dreams can turn dark. One quiet spring afternoon, Adea vanished without a trace, leaving only a silent apartment and a trail of questions. Follow the quiet roads, the whispered lies, and the long 60-mile chase that ended with no answers, only deeper mystery. Close your eyes as we trace the final footprints of a star who never got to shine. On a spring afternoon in San Bernardino, California, a Toyota Tacoma tore through the highways at an alarming speed. The vehicle wasn't just stolen, it was burning through the roads like a wild thing, filling the air with the thick, chemical-laced scent of red-hot exhaust. Every engine it passed seemed to groan under the pressure of its fumes. Sirens screamed across the streets nearby, shattering what had been a fragile, almost lazy afternoon calm. People paused on sidewalks, frozen mid-step, their heads whipping around toward the sound, sensing something serious was unfolding. Some pulled out their phones to record whatever was happening, but nobody could have guessed the depth of the tragedy tied to the chase. Behind the wheel was a man the police urgently needed to find. Not just a thief, but someone they believed could be far more dangerous. A murderer. For 60 grueling miles, the chase dragged on. A brutal test of endurance for the officers involved. Their cruisers were pushed to the brink, tires screeching and engines overheating under the strain. There were moments when it seemed they might lose him, moments where hope surged back. But the police, coordinated and relentless, refused to give up the pursuit. When Chris Spots finally brought the battered Tacoma to a halt in Corona, he knew deep down, the game was over. The long, frantic run had finally ended. But surrender. That didn't come easily to Chris. Officers fanned out, surrounding the vehicle with guns drawn. Their voices cut through the air, urgent, commanding, desperate for a peaceful resolution. They begged for reason to prevail. "Step out! Hands up!" they shouted over the loudspeakers. But inside the cab of the Tacoma, Chris made a different decision. From the front seat, a sharp, singular pop cracked the tense air like a final, irrevocable statement. Officers lunged forward, but it was already too late. Chris Spots would never answer for what happened. He would never face justice. He would never explain the fate of the young woman whose name had haunted the investigation. Adea Shabani. How had it come to this? How had a stolen car and a 60-mile chase ended in death, and left a young actress's fate a terrible mystery? The answers lay buried in the past. Born in 1992, Adea Shabani came into the world already dreaming in Technicolor. Those who knew her best said it was like she had movie reels spinning behind her eyes, even as a little girl. She didn't just dream about Hollywood. She built her life around it, step by determined step. In the quiet corners of her childhood home, posters of movie stars covered the walls. Some kids dreamed of ponies or spaceships. Adea dreamed of cameras, scripts, and flashing lights. Leonardo DiCaprio's face smiled down from nearly every inch of her bedroom, a tangible reminder that big dreams could be made real with enough faith and work. For Adea, it wasn't about fame alone. It was about the magic of storytelling. Neighbors like Crystal Newman remembered Adea as lively, spunky, and endlessly warm. If you bumped into her in the laundry room, you were guaranteed more than just a polite nod. Adea would dive into conversation, offering cheerful and often unsolicited laundry tips, turning even the most mundane chores into mini-adventures. She was the kind of person whose energy was simply contagious. Even as she stepped into adulthood, Adea's spirit remained youthful. Her apartment walls, thick with posters and vibrant colors, still looked like a teenager's haven. She held on to that innocence because it fueled her dreams. After earning a degree in business administration, Adea took a practical step. She moved to Dubai, finding steady work at a jewelry store. It wasn't the Hollywood stage she longed for, but it allowed her to build independence and save for the bigger leap she always planned. And by 2016, that leap came. Adea left behind the familiar sparkle of Dubai for the wild unknown of Los Angeles. She traded security for a small, slightly odd flat. A blank canvas she filled with fresh flowers, string lights, and dreams stitched into every corner. Every movie poster, every vase of flowers, was a promise to herself. She was here to stay, and she was here to make it. Once in Los Angeles, the first real step Adia took toward her dream was enrolling at the Stella Adler Academy of Acting. Not just any acting school. This was a place that had trained some of the biggest names in film history. Adia didn't treat it like a hobby. Acting was her craft, her mission. Rarely did she miss a class, and when she did, it wasn't without a reason. In an industry filled with people chasing easy fame, Adia stood out as someone chasing excellence. Her social media bloomed alongside her new life. She posted candid updates, selfies outside class, goofy videos with friends, small moments of victory and everyday joy. It wasn't about building a brand. It was about connection, about letting her family back home know she was safe, that she was still smiling. At Stella Adler, she made close friends, among them Christian Comums, who later remembered her as full of life, bursting with energy, serious about her goals but always ready with a joke. She wasn't the type to get halfway through a show or a dream and walk away. Once she started something, Adia finished it. During those whirlwind days of classes and auditions, Adia met someone who would alter the course of her life. Chris Spots. Chris, hailing from Colorado, was himself carving out a new identity. A psychology graduate from the University of Northern Colorado, he had dabbled in short films and documentaries, still finding his footing in the acting world. Their connection was instant, intense, but curiously private. Adia's friends and teachers, those closest to her, knew almost nothing about him. That secrecy raised no real alarm at first. After all, private romances were common in a city where relationships were often gossip fodder. But behind closed doors, the relationship was far more complicated. Chris was already engaged to Mary Elmack. Adia knew about Mary, an open secret between her and Chris. How much Mary knew remained a murky, unanswered question. But Adia stayed, even when the lines blurred. Friends described the relationship as chaotic, marked by passionate highs and devastating lows. Rumors swirled that Chris even proposed to Adia, meaning he now juggled 2 fiancés, 2 promises, and 1 ticking time bomb of a lie. Whatever future Adia had imagined, whatever wedding she had been dreaming of, unraveled with one irreversible decision. February 26, 2018. A date that should have been just another hopeful Monday for Adia Shabani. Instead, it became the day everything changed. That morning, Adia was scheduled for a critical class at the Stella Adler Academy, the kind of session that could make or break an aspiring actor's momentum. Casting directors were rumored to be attending. Roles were being handed out. It wasn't just another class. It was an opportunity, maybe the opportunity, that Adia had been working toward. Since she first stepped foot in Los Angeles, her friends knew how much this meant to her. She had talked about it endlessly, buzzing with a rare mix of nerves and excitement. For someone like Adia, who treated her dream like a mission, missing this class was unthinkable. But she never showed up. At first, there was confusion. Maybe she was sick. Maybe something minor had thrown off her morning. Calls were made, texts were sent. Messages flooded her phone, growing more urgent by the hour. But Adia's usually active social media, normally a bright stream of selfies, updates, and cheerful check-ins, went dark. Not a post, not a like, not a comment. Silence. That wasn't just unusual. It was terrifying. The last confirmed sighting of Adia was February 23rd, 3 days earlier, at a coffee shop she frequented. Nothing since. No messages, no casual check-ins, no good nights or good mornings to her friends or family. Her friends didn't wait. They trusted their instincts, and those instincts screamed that something was wrong. They contacted the police immediately. When officers arrived at Adia's apartment, their unease grew. The door wasn't locked. Inside, everything appeared strangely normal. No signs of struggle, no shattered glass, no upturned furniture. It looked as if Adia had simply stepped out for groceries or a walk and never returned. Her laptop still sat on the table, screen glowing softly. A drink was half finished on the counter. Little details that whispered, she had not planned to be gone for long. And yet she was. It didn't make sense. None of it did. Police turned to the building's surveillance footage, desperate for leads. When they scanned the grainy images from the elevator cameras, their hearts skipped. There was Adia. February 23rd, casually dressed. 2 suitcases by her side. She wasn't alone. Standing next to her was a man wearing a baseball cap, head lowered, just enough to obscure his face. But to those who knew Adia, there was no mystery. It was Chris Spots. Now the investigation had a direction. They had a person of interest. They had questions. When Chris was brought in for questioning, he didn't deny being with Adia. In fact, he admitted he had picked her up that day. He told the police a story. He and Adia had planned a trip. They were headed to his father's house in Northern California for the weekend. It was supposed to be simple, maybe even romantic. But somewhere along the way, Chris claimed, they got into a massive fight. He said he pulled over on the side of the road, 25 miles from Adia's home, and told her to get out. He said he left her there, just like that. No calls, no texts to make. Sure, she got home safe. No follow-up. He simply drove away. Detectives didn't buy it. Neither did her friends. Abandoning someone in the middle of nowhere after a fight? Leaving her vulnerable, without transportation, in an unfamiliar area? It didn't line up with anything they knew about Chris, or about Adia. And worse still, Adia's phone went dark not long after she was last seen with Chris. No pings, no activity. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Chris's story cracked. Under pressure, but without a body, without physical evidence, the police couldn't arrest him. Not yet. Their suspicions, however, deepened by the hour. March 1st, 2018. Chris Spots made his move. He packed up his belongings, grabbed Mary Elmack, his other fiancée, and fled in the stolen Toyota Tacoma, heading east toward Colorado. It was a desperate move, the kind people make when they know the walls are closing in. Police now saw him not just as a person of interest, but as a fugitive. Still, they had no direct proof tying Chris to Adia's disappearance. Only suspicion. Only the gnawing gut feeling that he knew more than he was saying. Maybe everything. Adia's family couldn't stand idly by. Her mother flew to Los Angeles. Grief and panic etched into every line of her face. She plastered missing person posters across the city. On telephone poles, shop windows, community boards. She offered a $25,000 reward for any information that could lead them to her daughter. Volunteers joined her, scouring the California woods, combing parks, checking alleyways and abandoned lots. Search dogs were deployed. Helicopters scanned remote areas, but nothing. It was like Adia had been swallowed whole by the earth itself. Every hour that passed, every fruitless search deepened the dread. Where was Adia? The deeper investigators dug into Chris Spots' background, the darker the picture became. It wasn't just that Chris was hiding things, it was the kind of things he was hiding. Friends of Adia came forward, each with a small, chilling piece of the puzzle. They spoke in quiet voices, glancing over their shoulders, as if even mentioning Chris's name might bring more trouble. What they revealed made it clear. Adia's relationship with Chris had been far from the fairy tale she sometimes pretended it was. One friend described how Chris had stolen Adia's phone, not once, but multiple times. It always seemed to happen after a fight. Adia would wake up after an argument, groggy and confused, only to find her phone missing. When she used her laptop to track it, it was always with Chris. Possession of her phone wasn't just about stealing a device. It was about control. It got worse. Another friend detailed a horrifying incident that took place on Valentine's Day, a day that should have been filled with love and celebration. Instead, it ended in violence. According to the friend, Chris and Adia had gone out for a romantic dinner. At some point, things turned ugly. They argued, voices rising, emotions spilling out into public view. Later that night, Chris allegedly suffocated Adia. Not in a playful way, not in an argument gone too far, but in a way that caused her to pass out. When Adia woke up the next morning, she couldn't remember what had happened. Her phone, once again, was gone. Chris, when confronted about it, brushed it off, claiming that Adia had simply passed out drunk at the restaurant, and he had taken her phone for safekeeping. He laughed it off, made excuses, minimized it. But her friends saw the cracks he left behind. The detectives knew now. Chris wasn't just a liar. He was dangerous. Every new piece of information painted the same portrait. A man who manipulated, controlled, and hurt Adia, and then gaslit her into questioning her own memories. When detectives compared Chris's version of events, the road trip, the fight, the supposed abandonment, with what they now knew about his violent tendencies, it all reeked of fabrication. Chris wasn't telling the truth. The only question left was, how much worse could it get? March 22nd, 2018. Nearly a month after Adia's disappearance, the stolen Toyota Tacoma was spotted in San Bernardino. The moment officers identified the license plate, adrenaline surged. Every department in California had been alerted to be on the lookout for the vehicle, but actually seeing it in person, that was different. This wasn't a drill anymore. It was happening. Inside the truck was Chris Spots and someone else. Another unidentified passenger sat beside him. To this day, authorities have remained tight-lipped about that individual, whether they were innocent, involved, or simply caught in a nightmare they didn't understand. Officers moved in, lights flashing, sirens cutting through the warm afternoon air. They signaled Chris to pull over. He didn't. Instead, Chris did what he always did when cornered. He ran. What followed was pure chaos. A high-speed chase that stretched across 60 grueling miles of highway and back roads, engines screaming, tires shrieking against asphalt. It wasn't just fast, it was reckless, endangering every innocent driver who happened to be on the road that day. It was as if Chris believed that if he could just keep driving, he could outrun everything, the law, the truth, the guilt. But, eventually, reality caught up with him. The chase ended in Corona, California. When officers managed to box in the Tacoma, Chris had nowhere left to go. They shouted at him to surrender, begged him to end it peacefully. Guns drawn, they inched forward, every nerve taut with tension. And then, from inside the cab, one final sound. A single sharp pop. Chris Spots had taken his own life. The police, and Adia's devastated family, would never get the answers they had chased for so long. Whatever secrets Chris carried, he had buried them with himself in that final act of violence. It didn't just feel like a loss, it felt like betrayal. Because now, the path forward was murkier than ever. Chris Spots may have taken his life, but in doing so, he left behind a trail of clues. Quiet, digital whispers that investigators clung to with everything they had. Chris's cell phone records and vehicle GPS became the final pieces of the puzzle. Carefully, detectives combed through every ping, every route, every breadcrumb he had unknowingly left behind. His recklessness, his belief that he could outdrive the truth, ultimately betrayed him. The trail led them to a remote, desolate part of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Miles away from the nearest town, miles away from help, miles away from hope. It was not a place people stumbled into by accident. It was where you went to hide something, or someone, you never wanted found. On March 27, 2018, just 5 days after Chris's final stand, a team of officers and forensic specialists made the grim discovery. At first, it looked like nothing, just a slight disturbance in the dirt, a shallow impression against the otherwise untouched earth. But the officers knew. Their stomachs twisted. They had seen enough in their careers to recognize what they were looking at. They started digging. What they unearthed was horrifying. A shallow grave. A young woman's body, left there with a cruelty that words can barely capture. Though badly decomposed, the body bore clear marks, tattoos that Adia's friends had described, tattoos she had loved, tattoos she had posted proudly, online. Dental records later confirmed it beyond doubt. It was Adia Shabani. The coroner determined the cause of death, blunt force trauma to the head. No accident, no chance, no ambiguity. Adia had been murdered, and now, her family, who had once prayed for a miracle, who had clung to hope through every sleepless night, were faced with a final, brutal truth. Their daughter wasn't coming home. The news shattered them. It shattered the friends who had searched the parks, hung the posters, believed that somehow she might still be alive. Adia's dreams, so vividly painted across her bedroom walls, so fiercely nurtured in acting classes and hopeful auditions, had been extinguished by someone she had trusted, someone she had loved. And Chris Spots, the man who could have explained, who could have given her family the one thing they needed, answers, was dead. All that remained now was grief. And questions. Endless questions. Shock rolled across Los Angeles like a thundercloud. The acting community at Stella Adler mourned. Friends who had once shared inside jokes and late-night dreams with Adia sat together in stunned, tearful silence. Her family, devastated beyond words, struggled to make sense of it. They had heard the police's theory that Chris, enraged during a fight, had killed Adia during their trip north, that he had hidden her body and returned home as if nothing had happened. But the actual moment, the why, the how, the final words spoken, would remain locked forever inside two people who were now both gone. Detectives uncovered even more evidence of Chris's deceit. Remember the funeral trip Chris had told Adia about? The reason they were supposedly driving to Northern California? It was a lie. Chris's biological father confirmed it. Chris's uncle, the one who Chris claimed had died, was alive and well. No heart attack, no funeral, no tragedy. Chris had invented the story as a cover. He had planned the trip with Adia under false pretenses. Why? Detectives could only speculate. Did Chris lure Adia away from the city with the intention to kill her? Was it a spontaneous, violent outburst during an argument? Or something more calculated, more sinister? They would never know for sure. Chris had stolen that truth, just like he had stolen Adia's future. In the end, Chris's smiling, casual demeanor the night he returned to his father's home on February 23rd said it all. He hadn't been grieving. He hadn't been heartbroken. He had been hiding something, and doing it well. That night, after a minor argument with his father about leaving, Chris packed up, walked out, and checked himself into a hotel. Alone, calm. The same way he had driven away from Adia, leaving her body behind in the cold earth. Adia Shabani's life didn't end in a grand, sweeping Hollywood tragedy. It ended quietly, brutally, alone, on a cold stretch of forgotten land. Her story was not supposed to end like this. She had come so far, from childhood dreams to Dubai, from steady jobs to acting classes in Los Angeles. She had fought for every inch of her progress. She had planted flowers in a strange new apartment to make it feel like home. She had filled her walls with the faces of those she idolized, believing that one day she would be among them. But all that hope, all that beauty, was stolen. Chris Spots will never face justice. He will never sit in a courtroom and hear the charges read against him. He will never be made to confront the faces of Adia's grieving family or feel the weight of their pain. He took the coward's way out, escaping through death what he should have answered for in life. And Adia's family? They are left with endless grief and endless questions. They wonder what her career could have been. Would she have walked red carpets? Starred in indie films first, then blockbusters? Would she have written stories of her own one day, changing? Lives the way the movies once changed hers? They will never know. There will be no wedding for Adia, no first big movie role, no triumphant phone calls home. There will be no new photos posted on social media, no proud graduation from Stella Adler, no shining future, just memories and heartbreak. The people who loved Adia have to live with the cruel irony that she spent her life believing in dreams, believing that people, at their core, were good, and that trust, that belief, was what killed her. Because sometimes the ones who smile the brightest, who promise the most tenderly, who say all the right things, hide the darkest intentions. Chris Spots had been playing two lives. He had been engaged to Mary Elmack. He had proposed, possibly, to Adia. He had smiled and lied and smothered and stolen and finally destroyed. It's easy to look back now and wish Adia had seen the red flags more clearly. It's easy to wish she had walked away the first time he showed control, the first time he disappeared with her phone, the first time he made her doubt herself. But the truth is, love clouds judgment. Hope makes excuses, and no victim should ever be blamed for believing someone who promised them the world. If anything, Adia's story is a reminder, a painful, brutal reminder, to trust your instincts, to protect your light fiercely, to recognize that not every smiling face is safe. Adea Shabani had so much left to give to the world. Her loss is not just her family's loss, it's ours too. We lost a voice that would have told beautiful stories, a spirit that would have brightened dark rooms, a heart that deserved better. In the end, there are no satisfying answers here. Only grief, only the echoes of what could have been. If this case left you thinking, if it left you grieving for a young woman you never met but somehow feel you know, you're not alone. Stay safe, stay aware, and most of all, stay kind. Because the world has enough darkness already. If this case left you thinking, stay tuned for more. Share your theories. I'll be reading.